This is a long story I'll try to keep short. My best friend, I'll call her S, has had some kind of spirit attached to her since we were kids. And he has been around for about 10 plus years now. When we were dumb kids, we would fuck around, use Ouija boards to talk to it a lot. It caused a lot of issues. We're both 23 now, and it just lingers, making an appearance a few times a year consistently. The past few years, it's made a habit of checking in on anyone new who comes into her life and becomes particularly close to her. Boyfriends, new friends, whatnot. A handful of people have all experienced the same thing independently of each other, without being influenced by stories. A very tall and lanky black shadow man, who wakes you up around 3 to 4, appears for a moment and basically just brings bad energy. You'll feel it watching you all night from the corner of the room. My dog has barked at it for hours once. A few people, including myself, have heard it put negative thoughts in your head, usually telling you to go kill yourself. Most people don't even mention it for a while, thinking it was just a dream. I didn't think spirits could do this kind of thing. It is honestly perplexing and worrisome, but has never caused any real harm beyond a lot of short-term anxiety to the affected. I thought I was at a chance of being schizophrenic until others described the exact same thing happening to them. At first read, this sounds clearly like a demon, a malicious spirit, right? For better for worse, S has accepted the spirit in her life because she's never felt the negativity it brings. She says she considers him a guardian angel, and it has protected her in the past. A medium she went to told her he's a trapped and angry human soul, but not a demon or anything to be afraid of. I don't know. So it's not going away anytime soon. Honestly, I kinda get it. She's been talking to it since we were kids. She's attached. It's easy to ignore, so whatever. And in the past years, I've only seen him in my room the one time, so it usually isn't a big deal. But recently I moved in with S, and we became roommates. My boyfriend, as a result, has been over a lot, and we've all became pretty good close friend group. Therefore, it decided to appear to my boyfriend in his house. My boyfriend has been going through an extremely tough emotionally time lately, and I know it decided to prey on him because his vibes were already low enough to invite in a negative spirit. It told my boyfriend to go kill himself, as he had a panic attack in the middle of the night. My boyfriend has never believed in any of this stuff. He has a very scientific mind. He still kinda doesn't believe what happened to him, and thinks maybe stress brought on hallucinations. I've never heard or read anything like this. A spirit who appears to be a demon to everyone else, but it switches up and brings my friend good energy and protects her? It's spiritually attacking people within months of getting to know her. I feel insane writing this. I honestly just want some insight or to know if anyone has gone through something similar. I'm angry about what happened to my boyfriend. When I was in my 20s, I had a girlfriend that was 10 years older than me. I lived with her 3+ weeks out of the month. When I didn't, I would sleep in the room I shared with my brother at my parents' home. One night about 3:30 in the morning, I slowly awoke to the warm feeling of a nude woman behind me. She was up against me, to the point that I could make out her body type and grooming habits. Her arm was around my waist and was giving off some heat. That is most likely what woke me up. As I was awakening, I made out the fact that I was at my parents' house, and my brother was sleeping in the bed across from me. At that point, I was like, who the hell is behind me? I actually waited until I knew I was completely awake. Moved my hands and feet a little. Meanwhile, I can feel the hot breath and breathing behind me. I jumped up fast as I could and threw the blanket off, looked down, and there was no one. My brother was like, what the fuck? And I was feeling the bed that was still warm to the touch behind where I thought I was sleeping. I was really expecting to find someone. My childhood home is haunted, but mostly steps and opening and closing of doors. My father said he saw a blonde girl in the hall once. but in the 17 years I have lived there, this was by far the most intense experience. Yeah, so this literally just happened to me 20 minutes ago. Okay, so I'm chilling in my living room by myself watching TikTok. It's Thursday, so I don't have to go to university tomorrow. I was relaxing after a long week of work. Well, I'm sitting on my couch, and behind me in the dining room. For reference, the rooms are open, so it's pretty much a wide space. We have this dining room light that's very dim, and it's yellow, and it's just crappy lighting. Anyways, the back of the couch faces the dining room, so whenever someone walks behind me, I can see their shadow on the wall, and I feel them behind me. You know how you can sense when someone is looking at you or near you? That kind of feeling. Well, I'm sitting on the couch. I see the shadow of someone walking behind. And I feel someone looking at my phone. I turn to show who I thought was my sister-in-law. The video I was watching only to see that no one was behind me. And when I went to ask if she had come into the living room, she was generally just as confused as I was. I then asked my brother, and he also didn't know what I was talking about. I've had similar encounters like this in the past, and usually it's them letting themselves known. Specifically, I have an old family friend who passed and likes to play pranks. It's not a negative energy, just familiar, so I'm assuming it's them. I recently remembered this story when I was walking by the playground. This story took place about 6 to 7 years ago when I was around 11 years old. One summer evening, 4 kids that lived on my street and I decided to go to the playground, only 100 meters away from our house. The oldest of us was about 15 to 16, and the only boy in our group. The other kids were all younger than me, but I don't remember their exact ages. They were still elementary school at that time. We had never spent that much time together, and after what happened, we never spent any time with each other. But I honestly not sad about that. Anyways, back to the story. The playground was sectioned into a football field in the front and an actual playground in the back. A huge hedge grew on the left side of the field at the playground. The hedge stopped and had a little entrance in the back of the playground where you could crawl through and find a very narrow path that led between 2 different fields where some deers were held. You could only move along when you were facing one side of the high fence because of how narrow the space was, which made each movement quite slow. The path basically led nowhere but to a garden. The wall of a building fastened the end of the path, which was used as storage. There was a path behind the hedge that could also be entered from the entry on the street. We had a great time at the playground, climbing up the slide and sliding down, while 2 of us swung on the swings, being pushed by another kid. We eventually got bored and decided to take a seat near the area where the sand was and just played in the sand. As we talked, we heard a distorted voice come from behind the hedge. We went quiet immediately as we didn't know the exact location where the voice was coming from based on the info about the path behind the hedge. Pretty terrified at that moment because it was getting dark. We found the tall figure standing behind the entrance of the fence. It looked like it was wearing a long black coat with a hood and held a torch in its hand. At least, it held something in its hand that burned. It was hard to see, as leaves covered, most of which made it hard to see. I can only remember this moment in pictures. It's quite blurry. We all looked at each other, silently communicating, what should we do? I suggested, with a nod of my head, to just make a run for it and sprint to our safe homes. But I was met with 4 disapproving looks. One of the younger kids yelled at the figure to fuck off and leave us alone. The voice was so distorted I couldn't understand what it was saying, and frankly I didn't want to. The other younger kids joined on, basically insulting the figure and telling it to go away. I think it started to sort of growl or scream, which terrified us so much that we, as I suggested in the first place, should just sprint out of there. As we did, I yelled at them for how stupid they were yelling at whatever that thing was, and that we would do, and what would we do if it chased us. But I was told to shut up and just run until we were near our home. Luckily, we weren't followed and returned home safely. For what I can recall, we never told anyone about what happened, and just spent more time together until each of us went home. 1 or 2 years later, I got closer with a classmate of mine, and I told him about the incident, and he claimed that it was him with his 2 younger brothers. I don't believe him, because they would sit or stand on each other's back. They still wouldn't have been tall enough as a figure that we saw on that summer evening, because the figure was as tall as a grown male adult. He still claimed it was him, and he just used a device in order to distort his voice. Yet, I still didn't quite believe his claims. The property was admittingly close to his home, but he would have had to enter the property of his neighborhood 2 houses next to his place in order to walk on the narrow path towards the playground. And I doubted that he would be so fast to appear and disappear with 2 other people. He probably tried to calm me down by saying that it was him. I don't know. I just accepted his claims to find peace with whoever or whatever we encountered in the playground.
Hello, sub-peeps. So, I've been a lurker here for a while now, and I really enjoy reading through stories based on all of your experiences, and I thought maybe I'd share mine too. Now, English isn't my first language, so I hope you guys understand if you come across a lot of grammatical errors. Thanks. So this happened around 8 years ago, and I was almost 11 at the time when we moved from the city to the countryside. My mom found a small property in a newly opened subdivision for me and Grandma, and also due to the reason that my grandma was missing the province life and just wanted to spend most of her time planting edibles and flower plants and taking care of animals, something she couldn't do while living in an apartment. My mom usually comes home every other 3 months, even when we were living in the city, hence why she didn't get much of a more spacious house than a 2-bedroom, though I still sleep in the same room with my grandma, so it's not going to be a big issue if she ever stays. My grandma was so thrilled during our whole trip knowing that she could finally start her own garden on the front yard of our new home. However, it changed when we arrived at the location and soon entered the house. I noticed that my grandma murmured something in her native dialect, apart from our mother tongue, but I just ignored it. Our first night was fine, though we easily drifted to sleep due to being exhausted. 2 days later, my mom decided to go back to the city for her work, so myself and my grandma went for a walk to explore the entire subdivision. We noticed that out of 30 houses, there were only a few occupants, including us, on that street. Same as the other streets where there are like a few townhouses that's said to be occupied by owners that come home early in the summer. Before I forgot, I just want to mention that on our first week when my grandma went to the nearest convenience store, around 5:30 p.m., to buy something for our dinner, I was just chilling in the living room, drawing something with the door barely open. And then she comes back holding a white plastic bag, in which you can visibly see some tomatoes and 1 large fish in it. I knew it was fish because I could see the eyes of it through the plastic. So anyway, she goes inside and walked past me through the kitchen, while I was still focused on what I was doing until I got completely oblivious that she's back there. I realized that I didn't hear any noises that my grandma would normally do, like running her mouth, nor did I hear the sound of water from the faucet, and when I went to check up on her, there was no one in the kitchen, and the light was still off. Then I saw her by the front door wiping her feet against the doormat, and then started nagging at me for leaving the door wide open, and she wasn't carrying a white plastic bag with the fresh fish and tomatoes, but instead she had a small yellow pouch and a few eggs and canned goods. I was so confused and I felt chills down my spine, but I didn't talk about it to her because I didn't want to make her feel uncomfortable, especially that it was already getting dark. Fast forward a few months and I started getting uncomfortable every time it was time for bed. Since we sleep together in the same room, I would make sure that she falls asleep first before me because I have this feeling like I'm being watched. One time, my 2 uncles paid a visit to our new house, and one of them asked my grandma if she could come with them and stay for a couple of days to look after my cousins, because he'll be staying at the hospital to keep company of his pregnant wife. So anyways, I spent the night drawing while my uncle just watched movies until he felt the need to sleep upstairs in our grandma's room. After an hour, I decided to sleep in the same room, and then past 2 a.m., I woke up from the noise coming in the living room downstairs. I could hear many voices talking there, until it sounds like it's already right behind the bedroom door. Those voices were not of humans. I swear, it was like a huge voice that's coming from under the ground, and it's in Latin. I lost my shit when the voices started laughing. I quickly grabbed my uncle's arms to wake him up, but he seemed like he was in a deep sleep because he wouldn't wake up, so this is when I started tearing up. I managed to wake up my uncle after a few shakes on the wrist and told him about what happened, but he just told me to go back to sleep. And my uncle isn't scared of anything, so I can understand why he didn't care. I told my grandma about it when she got back after a few days, and that's when she proceeds to share what she experienced during our first day. She said she felt a heavy and cold wind come up to her upon entering the house. I also told her about the time I encountered a doppelganger of her, and she was terrified hearing about that. My grandma isn't afraid of anything, just like her other children, except for my mom. My grandma would just swear on it to assert dominance, and sometimes whatever it was that was messing with us will not manifest after a while. But what we experienced living on that house was very intense. There were many occasions where we would randomly spot fresh drops of blood on the floor in the living room, and even in her bedroom. My grandma's face would become swelling for no reason too, and we thought she just ate something that might have triggered her allergy, but she has no allergies to anything. I myself would get sick and have high fevers for no reason. The first terrifying experience that both my grandma and I experienced together that made us pack our stuff the next day was when there was a typhoon and the electricity went out around 11 p.m. And guess what? Our bed started shaking. My grandma was so mad and started cursing, and then a sound of crying and an ill moaning can be heard coming from outside the bedroom door. It was so traumatic that we had no choice but to just put up with it until it went away. My mom and uncle arrived the next day and they helped us pack our stuff, but grandma just packed the important ones. We didn't come back since then. So I haven't really talked about this much, since it's just one of those situations I didn't feel like I needed to talk about. However, lately I've been thinking about it and I wanted some opinions from people who hopefully know a little more about this than I do. I'm not gonna lie, I can be a little skeptical sometimes, but I do believe in spirits and stuff to an extent. I've had several experiences before myself. However, I more so want opinions on this one, since I've never been able to fully understand it. Anyways, let me explain. When I was little, like 12 or younger, I think, I can't exactly remember how old I was since it was a long time ago. All I know is that I was young enough to be playing with my LSP and my neighbor who has long since moved away. My friend and I were having fun like normally, and then suddenly we both saw this bright orb, clear as day. Like to the point I had to look at her to see if I was the only one seeing things. But we both saw it because she freaked the fuck out, as did I naturally. We ran out of my room and I told my mom. My mom calmed us down. However, we were still scared to go back there. We simply told ourselves that we were just seeing things, or it was something reflective. But when I went to my desk later that night, I saw this beautiful 4-leaf clover pendant thing with a ladybug design on it. It was like one of those things you pin to your clothes. It looked old and I'd never seen it before then. I didn't really get a negative vibe from it though. Sure, the whole experience was surprising, but at the time I thought it was the coolest thing in the world. I told my mom about it and she said a spirit left me a gift or was trying to get us to notice it. I didn't feel scared after hearing my mom explain it and wore the pendant as a lucky charm after that, until I lost it one day while at school. What got me thinking about it was when I remembered how I lost it and I was hoping I could possibly get it back one day. I'm still not sure if kid me was seeing things or if I remembered it differently because I was so young, but I would like some opinions on it if possible. What could it mean? I'll draw a picture of what the pin looked like, just in case anybody is curious.